All right. Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Wednesday, September 18th, and boy, we have a busy night on our hands with 5 active tropical storms across the Atlantic and North Pacific basins, as well as several other areas of interest to monitor. So, just real quick from left to right, we do have let's see here if I can even get these all up. We do have tropical storm Kiko. We have tropical storm Mario, tropical storm Lorena, the remnants of tropical storm Imelda dumping heavy rain across Texas. We have major hurricane Humberto grazing Bermuda. We have an area of interest down south by the Dominican Republic and Haiti. We have tropical storm Jerry, and we have another little guy off screen moving this direction. So there are 5 active storms and about 2 or 3 other areas that could become storms over the next several days. So we have a lot going on. So let's go ahead and mostly focus on the Atlantic this evening, where we tend to do. And let's talk about real quick the remnants of tropical storm Imelda, no longer classified by the National Hurricane Center, but still dumping heavy rain across parts of Houston this afternoon and evening. We're still looking at the potential for several more inches of rain to fall in and around Houston. Basically, the Houston metro is right here off to the side, but generally, this area to the east of the metro area has seen rainfall totals over a foot in many cases, and some localized areas are approaching up to 2 feet of rain as this low continues to. You can see the center of this low pressure continues to work away, but as it spins away, you're getting these bands of heavy rain being reinforced by Gulf moisture from the south, and it's continuing to pile up those rainfall totals. As we often see with the Texas coastline here, these sloppy, weak tropical systems that aren't even really depressions or anything can still produce a ton of rainfalls. We saw with Allison and storms like that. So definitely a serious situation in Houston. This has even produced a few brief tornadoes. We saw one this afternoon near Houston that was pretty impressive. So besides the threat of rainfall, tornadoes and whatnot are also an issue this evening. So rough night or two for Texas as the system is really going to take its time getting out of town. It's going to move slowly to the north, but the rains will stick around for the next few days. We also have Hurricane Humberto passing by Bermuda today. This storm produced winds of about 70 miles an hour sustained with a few gusts up to 100 miles an hour earlier. The core of the strongest hurricane winds, you can see the divide right there in this brown circle, right on the edge of the tropical storm to hurricane force wind threshold, where those winds become sustained above 75 miles an hour, just brushed the island, and that looks pretty accurate because we just barely saw hurricane force winds get to Bermuda with those gusts obviously higher than the sustained. But the core of Humberto did miss, and it will move off to the north over the next several days. You can see how close it came to Bermuda, but the real strong core of winds did stay just a hair offshore. So good news for them, although, I'm sure there'll be some cleanup to do after Humberto passes. Looking elsewhere this afternoon, we want to talk mostly about Tropical Storm Jerry. This is the 5 p.m. from the National Hurricane Center. We're looking at a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm situated east of the Windward Islands, and it is generally moving to the northeast. At about 15 miles an hour. And this steady northeast track will continue over the next few days as we see Jerry likely become a hurricane either late tonight or tomorrow afternoon. Looking at the current satellite presentation, I'd say that might be sooner than later. The infrared satellite looks pretty impressive on the storm. We have a healthy core right here in the center, producing some serious sustained thunderstorm activity. You can see this big thunderstorm here in the middle doesn't just pop up and disappear, which indicates the core of Jerry is pretty well set, although there is some evidence that dry air is infiltrating the storm. If we zoom out to the water vapor loop, we can see here that dry air surrounds the storm all in this region. There's a lot of dry air. There's also an upper level low pushing more dry air to the south ahead of Jerry. So it's going to be in a fairly dry environment, especially in the low to mid levels over the next few days, which should halt any sort of rapid intensification of the system. But looking at microwave passes of Jerry this afternoon, this was about 1540 Z, so about 11 o'clock or so local. We can see that the core of the system is very healthy. And this was still when it was like about a 45-mile-an-hour tropical storm. This tight indication right here telling us that Jerry is one of these storms that we've seen before that may have a very resilient core, and despite some less than favorable atmospheric conditions like dry air and some wind shear, it may be able to hold off pretty well. Also, looking at the satellite imagery here, we can see that there's transverse banding going on in almost all quadrants, and we also see some pretty healthy bands coming out of the system to the south and to the north here, indicating that not only do we have some actual bands, but there's very little wind shear acting on the storm right now, meaning the upper level winds are very favorable for additional strengthening over the next few days. Looking at the forecast track, there are some things I'm a little bit concerned about, mostly the fact that Jerry may wind up passing a little further south than what is being indicated by the National Hurricane Center. So the general thought process is Jerry will essentially move over the next few days to the north, and it will basically find a break in the upper level ridge and move out to sea. However, I don't believe that's completely set in stone yet. We'll go back to the upper level winds or the upper level maps here, and we'll go just to 500 millibars. And basically, what we see here is that Jerry will essentially move this way over the next few days, and then this upper level trough, we actually have high pressure on both sides of Jerry, but then this broad trough that's kind of over in the the western Atlantic, should the same system that's bringing Humberto to the north in a way should coax Jerry up to follow it, and it should basically round the edge of this clockwise rotating high pressure, follow the break in the ridge, and should move out to sea. And that's all fine and dandy. As you see here that Jerry kind of disappears on this, the GFS really weakens the storm in about 2 or 3 days. So although we don't see it at this level anymore because the storm is weaker, we can still see a clear break between a high pressure over Florida, high pressure over the center Atlantic, and Jerry just basically following the break between the two. My concern though is this: if the GFS weakens the storm that much, it may not see the upper levels. So let's go to the upper levels here, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. So right now we're going to go back to current time. We have Jerry sitting right here somewhere to the east of the Windward Islands. So everything's fine and dandy, and the storm is going to move off in this direction, guided by that mid-level high pressure that's a little bit lower than what you see here, but is generally keeping the system steered in this direction. As Jerry intensifies over the next day or two, we expect it to become a hurricane, and looking at the satellite presentation that we just talked about, that looks pretty apparent that Jerry will likely be a hurricane. So hurricane is taller. It's taller in the atmosphere. So we're up at 250 millibars. We're way up in the atmosphere on this map I'm looking at right now. We're looking at winds 20, 30,000 feet above the surface. Okay, so we're looking at the upper level flow. What's going to happen is out ahead of Jerry, an upper level high is going to form in this region. So I'll go ahead and step our model through 24 hours, and we could begin to see that clockwise rotation right in this area where I just drew, indicating that high is starting to build up. We have Jerry right about here. So again, the upper level high is built over at some. The wind flow is kind of out of the north over Jerry in the upper levels, and Jerry is right here and moving, still steered by the mid to low level currents. But the upper level currents may start to become a factor. We go into day 2 in 48 hours. See, the GFS doesn't have the storm here, but the storm is supposed to be right about here. And if it's stronger than the model thinks, this upper level steering flow out of the north to northeast might become more of a steering factor than the models currently believe. And if that is the case, Jerry could track on the southern edge of this cone instead of the more northern track that the current official forecast would have. So I'm just a little concerned that the models may be underestimating the storm's ability to withstand the environment it's going to be in, and it may be incorrectly modeling a weaker storm, thereby steering it differently than it might behave. So I'm not forecasting Jerry to come flying into the Bahamas or Florida as a Category 4 or anything. All I'm saying is we might see this track adjust southward. And if Jerry is stronger in southward of here, it might be a little less likely to feel the steering influence that would pull it north. So, say if it's down here near Puerto Rico instead of up here near the 23, 24 degree latitude where it should want to turn, if it's a bit further south and stronger, that might throw off the timing, and it could also maybe give the storm more time for this high to bridge, and if that high bridges, it's going to be forced back over to the west. So I'm just kind of throwing out some things to look at and keep an eye on, and tell you that, hey, this forecast may not be as set in stone. The models really don't see it that much. We do see some European ensemble models. Most of them still curve the storm out to sea. A vast majority of them do just that, but there are a few outliers remaining, and most of these outliers, if you see the southern little group of models on the Euro, all these storms modeled on this run are stronger. See the darker colors on this side, the oranges and the pinks indicating the few members that fall outside of where most of them are all indicating the storm could be stronger, and the stronger ones are pushing the system further west. So it's just something to watch tonight. This is nothing, set in stone or anything. Jerry just looks like one of these storms that might kind of persevere in the face of adversity, and if it does, the models may have to readjust their thinking a little bit. It still does look likely the storm would take its turn out to sea, but I'm just telling you, this far out, we can't be certain that that's going to happen, and I do see a few indications that might not be as cut and dry, but that still makes no forecast or remarks regarding what could potentially happen to the East Coast. It's just something that we're going to have to watch over the next few days. And we're going to know by Friday, Saturday, when the storm is interacting in this area, what happens. But just remember with a storm, say like Dorian, remember how Dorian was forecast to come over the Haiti Dominican Republic, and then it jumped about here and actually went north of Puerto Rico, which changed the whole track from here on out. The same, things like that can happen. So just don't let your guard down if you're on the East Coast this evening. Keep a close eye on Jerry because it could still be a problem down the road. So again, just a lot going on this evening, guys. Once again, to recap real quick, all these storms and more are expected to form over the next couple days. Again, the North Pacific is looking pretty active with 3 storms, and then the Central Pacific is even currently watching 3 or 4 systems as well, with some chance of development out there near Hawaii. So a lot going on, and the best thing we could do is just stay alert and stay ready to act to changing forecast conditions. And if you're not already prepared, make sure you're getting there because all these systems aren't going to turn. Eventually one's going to find its way over this way. And we also have to watch the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico going into October for some more homegrown activity like we often see. So plenty more to come, guys. We'll be tracking it all. As always, I appreciate you watching and have a good one.